Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast, Resource Scheduling and Capacity Planning with OnePlan for Project Online. My name is Mike Otranto, and I'm a Strategic Account Specialist at Wickersoft. I'm also joined on today's webcast with Jim Patterson, who leads in the Business Development role, and Matt Wiley, our Product Manager. The line will not be open for questions, but please feel free to leverage the chat module within your GoToWebinar panel to ask your questions. We will be monitoring the chat panel throughout today's presentation. Feel free to email either myself or Jim directly, and we'll be happy to answer your questions directly. We will be including our contact information at the end of the webinar. If for some reason you get distracted or pull away during the webinar, no need to worry. I will be emailing the recording and slide deck of today's presentation. I will now hand off the webcast to Jim Patterson. Jim?
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the introduction, and thank you everybody for spending some time with us today and taking interest in Wickersoft's latest offering and webinar. So let's get into resource scheduling and capacity planning with OnePlan for Project Online. Some of the topics we're going to cover today is we're going to do an overview of resource management as a concept. We're going to talk about the components of a resource management process, and then we'll talk about how OnePlan conceptually will supplement resource scheduling in Project Online and add valuable capabilities and user experience to that. We'll spend a good chunk of time demonstrating those capabilities live in the solution, and then we'll wrap up with some summary, next steps, and some special offers that you might want to take advantage of. So with that, let's get started. So, Resource Management 101, what is resource management? It really is the efficient and effective deployment of an allocation of an organization's resource when and where they are needed. The benefits of doing resource management is to have visibility into where we're applying our resources. It helps us increase business value by making sure that we have people working on the right things. We can save time and money by being efficient and not wasting the limited and valuable resources that we have at hand. And we can also help increase project success rates by making commitments that are in alignment or conducive to the capacities and the ability for us to apply resources to those projects. We can also accommodate demand for those things in an orderly fashion so that we can take all the requests and demands that are coming in and properly allocate resources in a timely fashion based upon what we do actually have. And employee satisfaction if we do this well, because we're not overburdening resources or putting them into chaotic situations that lead to dissatisfaction and possibly turnover. So if we look at resource management challenges that organizations have, these are just some of them. The ones we see is resource ownership. Matrixed organizations where we have both project and functional or resource organizations. Oftentimes the ownership of those resources means that one piece of the organization, aka the project piece, has to facilitate getting resources allocated from the functional or resource management piece of the organization. If that is not a disjointed or a seamless process, it can be difficult to get those things on a timely basis and without conflict. On a resource-focused basis, resources get hit with assignments from a variety of different places. And if they have too many things on their plate, if there's competing priorities, or if it's not clear what are the priorities, the resource focus can lead us to working on the wrong things, or by stopping and starting, not getting done in an effective fashion. Also, non-project workload. We tend to, in project and portfolio management solutions, focus on the project management demand. But there's also a lot of non-project workload for a lot of resources, especially ones that are in more of an operational type of role that maybe do some project work. If we're not factoring in that non-project workload, we can actually be overcommitting resources and thinking we have bandwidth for them that we don't actually have. On the resource tracking side of things, the ability to actually see what people are actually spending their time on, regardless of what we've planned them on, so that we can actually make adjustments and see what's really happening on the street. From a resource visibility perspective, a lot of folks are doing this thing on a project-by-project basis or in separate disconnected tools or documents. And the idea is having a common set of visibility so we can understand holistically what's going on with our resources is often not easy. Consequently, people are doing a lot of manual reporting when leadership wants to see what are our resource needs, what kind of headcount needs do we have, where are our resources actually being applied. If we don't have that in a good resource management solution, process, and context, it's very difficult to mash up the data that we need to provide the reporting that's requested of us. And sometimes there's just too much information from too many sources on this that's too disjointed and disconnected, and it's very difficult to make sense out of it. So we might have a lot of data, but not a lot of good resource information. So what are some of the resource management steps that we might go through? Well, early on, we might do capacity planning. We think about that as really high-level capacity planning. What resources do we have on hand? And then for the projects and other work that we have, what are the high-level, FTE-based requirements or role-based requirements that we might have that we need to apply to these particular projects or elements of work? Ultimately, we're going to have to figure out who's going to do the work. So we have to do resource allocation and actually assign specific named individuals to projects first and foremost, and then ultimately, more than likely, assign them to specific tasks or elements of work within those projects or efforts. And then from a resource tracking perspective, we want to get feedback from where the resources are actually working, what progress they're making, so that we can make adjustments along the way. Team management is really about optimizing the resource teams that we're putting on these projects and really getting better as we go on through and getting more effective as working together as teams and being more efficient in the way that we're delivering work. And then from an overall work management perspective, factoring in all dimensions of work beyond project and factoring that into the process. So these are components that are ideal, but not everybody is ready from an overall maturity perspective to do all of these things at one time. So what we would say is that as you're contemplating improving or making changes to your resource management approach and your processes, factor in these resource management maturity dimensions. Are you going to plan this stuff out generically by roles or by named individual resources? What planning or tracking granularity are you going to do? Are you going to do them at a project level, at an initiative level, or all the way down to specific tasks and subtasks that you want to figure out allocations of resources on those? Do you want to track costs associated with resources? Do you just want to forecast resources for future projections, or do you also want to compare them with actual so you can see how we're running compared to what our assumptions were going in? Do we have an approval and negotiation process that we need when we have that matrixed organization where we have project managers and functional resource managers needing to communicate and work together in order to get the right resources on the right projects? And then there's the whole idea of governance and prioritization. How do we know what are the most important things, and when there's competing priorities, knowing what's been approved or what is the highest priority for the organization? That can also be a very mature aspect of a resource management and project portfolio management process. If we look at just a chart from a Gartner publication, if you look at a couple of maturity levels from 2, 3, and 4, you'll see that typically certain things are tackled in there. And if you notice in maturity level 2, the lowest one that's depicted here, it's mostly resource capacity planning. It's that high level planning of, resource types and roles prioritized at a project level, and then potentially by FTEs or headcount. And then, detailed resource allocation really may only just be beginning, and you might even just be tagging resources so you know who's working on what rather than quantifying that. Notice as we move into level 3, you get a little bit more detail on the resource allocation. You get some more maturity and other aspects on the detailed resource allocation while we're still doing resource capacity planning, et cetera. The idea is, in a crawl, walk, run, depending on where you're starting from, it's good to tackle this and master it at a level that's appropriate for you today, but build a roadmap for where you want to go in the future. So resource management musts is you want to be honest with yourselves and assess your actual readiness to embark upon these things. Understand your organizational maturity as it may relate to resource management, and then understand the culture of the overall environment that you're going to be in. And then build a resource management roadmap that helps you advance the ball or stretch the organization from where they're at today and make incremental improvements, but maybe don't expect that you're going to achieve that highest level of maturity and ultimate resource management nirvana all in one step. And another key piece is to define your process first about how you'd like to operate as an organization. Only then can you model those in tools and other automation that you want to put in place, because it's very difficult to model vapor if it doesn't exist. So how are organizations managing resources today? Well, probably the biggest thing that we see today is that people are using Excel. Why do they use that? Well, one, it's freely available. It's usually on everybody's desktop. We all know how to use it to some degree. and kind of sharing it or sending files around or putting it out in a file share is just an easy way to get to it. The downside is that everything is manually updated, cell by cell, line by line, record by record, meaning that as things are planned, and these are typically on a time phase basis, moving things out on a cell by cell basis can be very laborious and tedious. And it's also very tough to summarize resources across multiple projects. And also, usually there's different dimensions and perspectives where people have to navigate through multiple tabs, et cetera, to understand where resources are allocated, and very difficult to stay on top of the changes as they occur. If you look at it, when people use Excel, it's usually a lack of standards. People are innovating their own spreadsheets, and seems to be a very individual process and approach. But probably more importantly, as I mentioned, it's a very manual and static model, meaning that you build it and you invest a lot of time and effort into building it, but from the time you actually finish the model, it may already be outdated because things are constantly changing, projects are moving, timelines are shifting. And then you really have no visibility onto the actual resource capacity. You could actually have the need in there, but the resource capacity is sometimes difficult to factor in against that. Ultimately, it's time consuming. It's harder to get visibility and insight to all the dimensions of the project. The governance and prioritization typically isn't part of this. And teams are always working on other things that impact the projects, things like documents, issues, risks, and other things that are related to the project management data set, of which resource management is just one component. And as I talked about, strategic alignment of projects to company objectives and the priorities that we have are usually not clear when you're using a spreadsheet type of model. So what are some transformative options that we can take here? Well, one is we want to have an environment, ideally, where our processes are embedded into the solutions or the technology that we use to manage this. We'd ideally have a central data store that has resource and other components in it, so that we have everything at our fingertips that's connected and part of a more complete and comprehensive data source. And then ultimately, we'd like to take that rich data and make actionable intelligence out of it all, so that we can make good decisions and trade-offs as we go through the process. So Project Online from Microsoft is a great solution as a repository and a core foundation for this. It has portfolio management, project management for execution, and as we see highlighted here, resource management. And not just resource management in one way. It has capacity planning, it has detailed resource allocation and assignments, and it even has timesheet reporting, so you want to track actuals against the actual plans that you do as well. And let's talk about that a little bit more. To really get a look at all of your resource work, it generally is a combination of your high-level capacity plan, which in Project Online is called resource engagements. This is this project level estimates, usually on an FTE basis, of we need this type of resource over time. And then ultimately, when it gets close to time to execute on these projects, the detailed tasks and schedules generally have resources allocated to them in a more detailed and tactical fashion, so that we have a combination of upcoming resource engagements and current and near-term schedules that basically have more detailed resource allocations to them. This really kind of defines oftentimes the capacity versus demand view in a total resource requirement. So OnePlan from Microsoft really adds to this mix. And as Matthew will show you in the demonstration, more visual resource planning with more immediate feedback and more drag and drop capability to make resource planning and trade-offs easier, and going from named individuals to specific resources. We can actually look at this from an individual project basis, or look at capacity versus demand and over-allocation from an organization-wide perspective across all projects and work, meaning we can see before we make an allocation whether or not we'd be over allocating someone from what's currently on their plate. We also have collaboration, so as people are actually put on projects, specific named individuals, there's tools in here from a collaboration perspective where they can actually get those assignments and actually see and provide feedback electronically via email updates from the specific things that are expected from them. And then we can leverage this stuff in portfolio analysis and Project Online. all this capacity planning that we're doing is nice from a picture perspective and understanding from a data point. But as we're looking into deciding what projects to tackle and what priorities we want to put in place as an organization, Microsoft Project Online has a rich set of portfolio analysis and optimization capabilities such that it can leverage this capacity planning data to say, here's all the candidate projects that we have. How much of this can we do given the headcount that we have? And some other things that Matthew will go through today. And then ultimately, the dynamic resource reporting and analytics for decision support. This becomes a natural output of this process. So instead of mashing up things in spreadsheets or from a variety of different data sources, we have a central repository that actually feeds to actual native reporting that becomes a natural output of the process. And the report generation doesn't become a project in and of itself. Ultimately, the use cases that we commonly see, and we'll talk a little bit about today, is the first use case where a project manager has a need on a project and typically understands what kind of roles they're going to need on their project, and maybe even to what extent or the tentative timing of what's going to be required. And by putting those into the mix, a resource manager then can review, and they can determine who are the right specific people to actually fill that role on the project, and then ultimately have that assignment go back to the project manager for their acceptance and then allocation onto specific detailed tasks within their project. Some organizations just start from the resource manager, and the resource manager then just does resource allocation for the projects and then feeds that forward to the project manager. Ultimately, it handles this need of the matrix organization where we have byplay between project and resource managers and really have ultimately a negotiation process. So hopefully that tees up for you some concepts on the resource management side of things. And let's get into the actual demonstration, and Matthew will show us how it works in action. Take it away, Matthew.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jim. All right, so I'm logged in here into Project Online. Project Online is part of the Office 365 platform and experience. So it's just one of the different many apps within Office 365 that all work together really well. So for example, we'll see reports in just a second on this resource management data in Power BI. Documents that you upload can be accessed through OneDrive, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm here within Project Online, and I'm looking at a list of all of my different projects, the status of those projects, and a high-level timeline of them. And so I can see some projects are still in the requested state, some are approved, some are in progress. We have metrics here like the overall health of these projects, the schedule health, work health, how are we doing from resource perspective, cost perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And then how that lays out over time. And so when a new requested project goes in, one piece of the equation of whether or not we're going to approve it and when can we get it done is really around the resourcing. There might be other things like, say, budget and costs, but a key piece is around resources. Do we have the resources to do this? Who can do it? When? So that we can go and actually execute on this work, get it done, get the value out the door, either for our own business or for our customers or whatever it might be. So I'm going to now, as more of a project manager who has been assigned to this project to build out this resource plan and just the proposal as a whole generally, I'm going to pop into this social networking integration project that I'm working on building out so that we can get it approved and staffed and ready to go so we can start to actually go and execute on it. And so I'm going to build out a high-level resource plan. At this point, I don't have to go and build out a very detailed project schedule, so I don't need to necessarily go and put in 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 2,000 tasks. I'm more just trying to understand at this point, what types of resources am I going to need, for how long, and how much. So we can get an idea, is this a 5-person project, a 10-person project, a 100-person project? Is it for the next 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, so on and so forth. And types of resources I need, for example, would be business analysts, developers, certain roles or skill sets, if you want to call it that. And so what I'm looking at now is the high-level resource planner right here within my web browser. And on the left side, I can see the different resources that I've already pulled into my resource plan. Notice you can start with just generic resources, like a business analyst or a developer. I don't yet know who that developer is going to be. I just know I need a developer. Later on, we can go and staff that, and I'll show how that works. And if you're working with smaller pools of resources, smaller teams and groups, and you already know who might be working on this particular project, then you can also start from named resources here, like, say, Grace Williams, Patrick Sands, etc. So you have the option there, either or. Across the top, you can see right now, we're looking at this by week. So weekly, it's showing me these resources load and availability and such. But I can switch that. So if I want to see it with a little less detail, maybe by month, I can do so here. It's also showing this in hours, but I can flip that over to do it by percents if I want, FTE percents, to see it more that way. And I'm looking at a particular period of time. So we could look out 6 months, we could look at a year, you know, as far out as we need, depending on, you know, how big this project's going to be. And right now, I'm just looking at the things that are planned for this particular project. But if I say show all work, it will actually then pull in work from all of the other projects that these resources may be working on or being asked to be working on. So I can get better visibility into that as I'm actually building my resource plan. So, for example, let's say I need a business analyst to work on this particular project. I can come here and I can simply just hit the little add button, and I can fill out some information, like I can give it a little description of what I'm going to need this business analyst to do. I can key in the resource that I want, in this case, business analyst or a particular one, a date, hours, and or a percent. But there's kind of a nicer, easier way, in my personal opinion, that I like to be able to do this, and you can simply just drag and drop. So if I expand to this business analyst, I can see everything that that person already has going on. And say if I was looking for Daniel Williams, I can see all the things, you know, Daniel Williams had going on. And I can simply just click, drag, and drop on the period of time that I need that resource. So it makes it really quick and easy. It fills out a lot of these things for me. If I want, I can then put in a description here, and I can say, actually, I only need you part-time, so I'll do 4 hours a day, and it automatically adjusts that to 50% allocation. Or you can do it from a percent perspective, and it'll automatically adjust the hours. So you can plan either way in percents or hours if you choose to do so, and it'll translate that all for you. And so it's super simple to come in and build this out and go, okay, I need a business analyst from this period of time to that period of time. You know, put in a little information if you need or choose to do so. I need this person, and kind of drag that out, right? And so what that allows me to do then is understand, okay, for this particular project, we're going to need this resource or these types of resources for this period of time at this, you know, amount. So now we understand what's going to be needed for this project, the demand that this project is going to create. From there, that all flows into Project Online. And as Jim mentioned, we can then utilize the portfolio analysis module, if we choose to do so, to do some what-if scenarios around this and try to build out our roadmap of when we can do projects based off of the resources we have, and or answer questions like, do we need to hire resources? Are we willing to hire resources? Maybe we need to push some projects out. So first, you start out in more of a cost perspective, looking at the cost versus the benefit, and you can do a whole analysis around that and go, you know, what if I have $3 million compared to $5 million, then what can I get done and such. After that, the next step is really around resourcing, and so I'll jump into that here. So once we've figured out, okay, we have the budget to do these projects, and here's where we want to put our dollars, it doesn't necessarily mean we can do those projects in the periods of time they're being asked to be done, right? We have resource constraints depending on what's needed for these projects. A lot of times this is overlooked, and at the point of which a project is supposed to start, we're scrambling to get resources on it, and or then trying to hire contractors or whatever it might be to get it done, and projects end up being delayed or not staffed properly, and people are over allocated, and that can cause lots and lots of issues. So here what I'm looking at is it's showing me, okay, out of all these projects that you want to do, that's great. Within the period of time that you're looking at when they're being asked to be done, it's selecting these projects. It's not selecting these. It's saying with the resources you have, this is what you can get done. More importantly, if you do these projects with the resources you have, you will maximize your value, your business value as it was defined within the system. And you set up different drivers, and there's weightings on that and an algorithm behind it to calculate out this value. But then you can go, well, we need to get all of this done. We have budget, they've been approved. How are we going to get this done? What's the plan? And so we can do things like, what if we take this project here and we move it out through 6 months? And so I can say, what if we, stagger these things a little bit better so we don't have to work on them all at the same time? And then I can recalculate, and that'll move some projects in. The other thing I can do is say, what if I hire 3 resources and hit recalculate? If I bring in 3 new resources, maybe just contractors, they don't necessarily have to be full-time forever, but to come in and work on these projects, then what can I do? And so you can see if I hire 3 more resources, it just brought in 2 more projects. And there's some really cool things in here that there's a requirements details that shows a heat map of where the problems are by role and by resource and such. I really like the hired resources report. It's going to tell me exactly what 3 resources I need. So it's going to say you need this resource on this date to this date at this cost, so on and so forth. So you can see we're short in developers. So I need 3 developers to work on these projects from this date to that date with the cost and the work and the rate, and so on and so forth. So it just kind of lays it all out for you. There's lots of more bells and whistles, but that's kind of the big piece of it. And so from more of a portfolio management perspective, as a portfolio manager, department manager, whoever it might be, I can come in and do these what if scenarios and then figure out, okay, here's at a high level how we're going to lay out these projects so that we don't overload our resources at any particular time. Then you hit the commit button here, that commits it, moves it into the next stage so that we can then go and start actually getting actual named people assigned to these projects based off of the constraints that we have to get going. And so there's a resource pool behind all this that you would have preloaded. We can pull that in from Active Directory. We can pull that in from, say, your HR system, like a Workday or something like that, or they can just be bulk loaded in from like a spreadsheet kind of a view. But there's a resource pool that we're all working from at the same time. And that resource pool, defines who are what types of resources and such, and that's what's driving all this. It takes into account holidays, it takes into account if people are part-time, if people are coming on, leaving. That's all in the system and understood, behind the scenes behind all of this. And so now as a resource manager, I can then come in and I'm looking at a very similar view to what we saw before, but I'm looking at all of the resources that I have access to as a resource manager, all the ones that I manage generally, and or if we give people access to see all of them. And I can do the same kinds of things. Maybe I want to see this by month instead of by week. I can flip that here. I can also do groupings though. Let's group this up, say, by role. So I just want to look at my business analysts or my DVAs or my developers, at one particular time, and then I can expand into that and see, okay, here are all my business analysts. Here's how they're doing. Are they over allocated or not? If they're over allocated, they show up in red, and we can check in on them. And then we can see all of the generic requests that are coming in. And we, for this business analyst here, for different projects, see who's available, and I can simply just drag and drop this from my generic resource, say, up to another person who has availability within that particular time. So it's all very drag and drop here. Can make it really easy to come in and move things around and make adjustments and do what I need to do to get these projects staffed, is what it comes down to. So you can group it up by role. I could group this up by department if I wanted to organize it that way, or just lay it out. Here are all my resources. Here's who's doing what, and as I expand into each one, people are having problems, I can see what things they're working on across all projects, what's contributing to that, as well as who has availability to take on new work, so on and so forth. And utilize this as my view to be able to get visibility into that, as well as make adjustments and changes so everything's getting staffed. After the fact, once someone is staffed onto a project manager and or resource manager, or whoever's responsible for these work items here could come in and they could select one of these items that someone is working on and say, I want to get updates on this. A lot of times it would be more like a project manager doing this. For this selected item that I just selected, I want to get status and is it complete or not? And I could add other things if I want. I also want to understand what % done you are, those types of things. I could send it now just one time, or I could send this automatically every day if I wanted to do so. And it basically sends that person an email and they can update their status right from that email without having to log back in. You can put a little message here if you want to. So there's kind of some social work management capabilities built into this to approve status. So this is all on the front end, on the resource planning side, right? We put in a high-level estimate. We did some portfolio analysis to figure out when we can do things based off of the resources we have, and or do we need to hire more resources and ramp them up. Then we can come in, we can see who's working on what and assign things out to actual named people, as well as make adjustments through this screen here. And then lastly, there's a full set of reports that we can provide to management and leadership and anyone else necessary to look into this. So I'm going to pop into Power BI here. And there is an out-of-the-box report pack specifically focused on resource management type information. I should throw out there that later on, if you utilize the timesheet capability within Project Online, we can capture those actual hours on what was planned and then look at budgets versus actuals types of things around resources as well. So there's some other capabilities here that can tie in. But coming into my resource management dashboard, now I can view and be a little bit more analytical and look at things in lots of different ways right here within these reports, as well as deliver these to other people that may need them. So right now on this home page, it's drawing my attention to issues is the goal here. For example, top allocated resources. Grace Williams is 290% allocated. That's a problem. We need to get her some help to get some, get some of that off of her, right? And from here, though, I can come and I can drill down and or filter into this. So if I wanted to look at just my developers, I could select developer here and it will filter down and just show me my developers. If I wanted to look at just a specific department, IT, HR, or whatever it might be, different departments that you might be managing resources across, I could filter that down. I can even come to specific people. I just want to look at Adam Barr, see how Adam is doing and get lots of different information around him. This is just the front kind of dashboard. There's tabs across the bottom that allow me to look at all of the different areas of resource management. So if I'm more interested in resource utilization, are we utilizing our resources properly and getting the most value out of them without over allocating them too much? And this will give me visibility into that. So the top line here is the amount of capacity we have over time. Notice it goes up, it goes down. That's because there are different amounts of working days per month. There are holidays that happen. We're bringing resources on and off. So it's accounting for all of that. And then as we go and we assign people to projects, this bar builds up here at the bottom. And so if this bar goes over that line at any particular period of time, then we know that we're over allocating our resources as a whole, whatever resources we've selected that we're looking at. If I was just looking at developers, this would update accordingly for developer, so on and so forth, or even just a specific person. If it's way under it, like it is here, then we know that we're not utilizing our resources properly. We could, get more value out of them. We could be doing more projects and more work and so on and so forth. Down here at the bottom, then you can see the details of each of those. Flipping over more from an availability perspective, how available our people are. This is showing availability here by role, but we can then come and we can drill in and go, here's my support role, here's how available all my support people as a whole are, but if I click on that, it will then drill in and show me each of my support people and how available or not each one is. So you can start to drill into different levels. And these are just the out-of-the-box reports. They can be tweaked. So maybe you wanted to start out at team and then drill into resource, or department, then team, then resource. These can be tweaked so that you can drill in through whatever levels you want and organize things and group things the way that you want as well. This particular report starts to get into kind of some of the data that you'll get later on as we actually go and execute on these projects. For example, I mentioned timesheet data or actual hours that are being spent on this work. And so what this is showing me is up front, I went and I built my resource plan. That's this kind of dark blue line here, the resource plan that we showed we built earlier. This was my initial estimate. Later on, I might build a more detailed project schedule, and we can call that our forecast. And that's this blue line right here. Whoa, it's twice as much, in this particular quarter anyway. So obviously up front, we either didn't plan enough resources, or when we're doing our project schedules, we're padding things way too much. So there's a gap there. We need to figure out what that is. So this can help us see how good we're planning. Later on, we went and put actual work in. So these are timesheet hours, basically, or actual hours. These could be rolling in from a different system, like a financial or other timesheet system you might be utilizing. Roll that all together so then we can see how that all lines up. Budgets, plan versus forecast versus actuals, basically. So there are other reports in here. I won't go through all of them today, but we can look at this in lots of different ways and get visibility into what's going on, and are we putting the resources on the right things, and where are problems, are we utilizing them, et cetera, all through here. And then people can consume this in many different ways. So I could subscribe to this and get an email every so often, however often I choose, with this particular report in it, if I choose to do so. So that's one really cool option of getting these. I could print this out to a PDF. I can export this into a PowerPoint. So instead of having to try to manually build reports into PowerPoint, I just export it out. I take it, I go do my meeting, show what I need to show, and I'm good to go. So that can be really useful. There's lots of different ways here. And lastly, these things are even available through a mobile app. So if you come in here, I'll show what that kind of sort of looks like. You can switch this over to a phone view and see these types of things right here within my mobile app as well, if you choose to do so. So it's a really great way to get that data out of Project Online without having to do manual effort or manual mushing of a lot of data in Excel spreadsheets and all types of things, into pre-built reports that we can tweak and modify and do what we want with. Get that to the people that need the information so they can get better visibility, make better decisions. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Jim for just a couple more slides, and then we'll let you guys go for the day. So here you go, Jim.
All right, terrific. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Terrific. Well, let's do a little summary and wrap up, and thank you for that presentation and demonstration, Matthew. All right, so let's talk a little bit about summary. Some of the things to recap that we talked about, that resource management is a critical success factor for overall PPM success, that the approach and process should align with organizational readiness and maturity as we embark upon this for our individual or specific organizations. High-level capacity planning is a good place to start because it's the high level of information that's easier to first capture and then maintain, especially when you're just getting started in a resource management process. But more detailed resource allocations down at the task or tactical level can follow as you are ready or as it is needed by your organization. Some folks stay at the capacity planning level and don't go down to the resource allocation level. Project Online provides a great platform for all the PPM capabilities and embeds the resource management component in the context of all the other project information that's available to you from that solution. And then Wickersoft's OnePlan extends those capabilities to provide enhanced visual planning and capabilities, streamlining that process, and then fully integrating into that Project Online repository and solution. And ultimately, as a natural output for reporting, as Matthew showed you, it just seamlessly flows into that reporting mechanism so that it becomes a natural output of you working your process, and you don't have to build the projects as reports in and of themselves. If you're interested, Wickersoft is a triple gold certified Microsoft partner. We have gold certifications in project and portfolio management, collaboration and content, and cloud productivity. We are a joint venture and partly owned by Microsoft, and we were founded in 2002, and we have a global footprint. We do all the consulting, business applications, managed services, and staffing that people might want to support their PPM and other efforts. I would say that if you look at us, we can be a one-stop shop for you to help get the most out of your investment in your Microsoft technologies. And as you can see, we also have our own applications that supplement or enhance the Microsoft technologies to help people get the most of these things and tailor them for their organizations. We have a specialty in really project and portfolio management and extending that to just overall work management. So whether it's in Project Online, doing a more agile work in Visual Studio, SharePoint, or the things that are available in Microsoft Dynamics for things like field service management, professional services automation. We have specialization and capabilities in all these areas and actually make these different pillars within the Microsoft stack work together more seamlessly. For attending today, we have some special offers for you. If you'd like a free PPM and resource management assessment of what it would take to get you into the solution and get started, we're happy to talk to you about that on a completely complimentary basis. And if appropriate, we can actually offer you a chaperoned Project Online trial that could potentially have OnePlan put into that and actually support you through that process so that we can handhold you and make sure that you get the best experience from that trial as possible. Or we gave you some very generalized demonstration and concepts today. If you have specific needs and you want a more one-on-one presentation or demo for your organization, we're happy to schedule that with you. To get a hold of us, you can reach us at contactus@wickersoft.com would be the best place to go generally. You can see more information at our website at us.wickersoft.com, and also some more information on OnePlan at project-online.com/OnePlan. This is just one of many webinars that we do. So we have a whole library of recorded ones that we've done in the past on demand if you want to go to wickersoft.com/webinars. And there we listed our upcoming webinars if you're interested and haven't already registered. So with that, that's all we have for today. Thank you again for spending the time with us today, and we hope to hear from you and potentially working with you one-on-one in the future. Have a great day.